Thokoza. Can we all hear me? Ngiyazwakala. Can we all hear me? Can we all hear me? Okay, can you all hear me? Please let me know if you can hear me. If I can't be heard, please let me know. Please let me know. Please let me know if I'm nice and audible and clear, and that you guys can that everyone can see the presentation nice and clearly and vividly. Please let me know. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, okay, I'm just adjusting the height here on the laptops so we can begin promptly. Thank you. It's good, nice and loud and clear. Let me just switch the light on. Okay. So thank you. Okay, so according to my clock, it is 8 minutes to 4. So we'll start in 8 minutes. If you have any questions on the previous lectures, anything that's burning, that's been burning your mind for a while, ask away, and I shall answer it here. I'll take maybe 2 or 3 with this 8 minutes that we have whilst abantu begin to trickle in. So if you have anything that's burning your mind, anything you really need to ask, please feel free. To ask away. Just ask away, and I'll definitely answer it right here, right now, before we begin. Okay, I don't see any questions in the comments. No questions thus far. Okay, here's a question. Usizeti asking, do you have abadala? Asking for me, do I have abadala? Everybody has abadala. It's all dependent on the level of, how to answer this question. Everybody has the capacity to heal, right? That's first and foremost. It's just that you heal through your craft, right? So angiboli mina and angilapha abantu esigodlweni, but how I heal is through education, through educating people to heal themselves. That's how I heal, and I would not be able to articulate the messages if I was not connected nabadala. So it's not about whether or not wonke umuntu nabadala. It's just how connected you are nabadala bakho, and how well you're able to comprehend their messages and communicate them and act upon those messages. That is different with different people. I hope that answers your question. Okay, here's another question just before we begin. I just wanted to know, how can one tell in the African spirituality if they have a reincarnated soul? Okay. The best way to know if you have a reincarnated soul is to look at your dreams. But when I talk about dreams, I'm not talking about seeing something I'm talking about you physically experiencing something that happened way before, right? So I dream, right, just like anyone else, but I've never had that experience of being. I've had it a couple of times where it's almost like you're physically being taken to a different time, and you're physically in the 80s or the 90s or the 60s and 50s and 40s or even the 1800s. So the best way to know if you're a reincarnated soul is to look at your dreams, okay? Especially the ones if there is a particular individual, whether it be Ikeke noma isalukwazi. If there is someone who comes to you all the time, or they're not speaking, you need to get them to speak to you. And that's how you can begin. Reincarnation, the best way to know is you've got to, it's not like you're not dreaming, but you are, it's more along the lines of transcendence. And you're experiencing something which is beyond upupa. Because you are physically in the 1800s and you are seeing what was there and you are able to articulate, especially sometimes umuntu afemba abhodle akhuluma ngento that happened 300-400 years ago and in such detail that it isn't in the history books, but that's how you can know that they were there. Okay, I'm just going to take 2 more questions. Okay. Actually, time now is. I'll take 1 more. I'll take the one more. Okay. So Fortune or Khatib is asking what happens if someone died or dies without having imbeleko done. I'm going to tuck into the rituals and procedures when it comes to imbeleko, umemulo, mhlonyan. And so all of those rituals from birth all the way up until death. I'm going to have a whole lecture just on that. So please keep your question. Please keep that question. Please keep your question, please, for that lecture. Okay, I'm going to take, okay, I have a bit more time. Please help. Every time I eat meat or dairy products, my joints become sore. What can that mean? Okay, so first things first, please go see your GP and actually get tested for any kind of physical illness, right? Because you might be lactose intolerant. I'm just thinking about the dairy products. But kungenzeka ukuthi kukhona olambile that's why, so you can't eat those products because Itongo doesn't want them. Or alternatively, you can't eat them because someone else is meant to eat them, and because they're not eating them, therefore you won't eat. So please, can you do this for me, Caroline? And I want you to ask ukuthi biza laba besibongo sakho, and you're going to call them and you're going to say, look, I understand. Tell them that you're struggling with eating dairy and meat. Ask ukuthi ubani okhala ngenyama nobisi, and ubani ofunani. So you need to find out who wants what exactly, because a lot of people do umsebenzi, but you need to direct umsebenzi to that particular individual, or else it's falling on deaf ears. So what you need to find out is ubani okhalela inyama nobisi, specifically ubani, and for what reason. Okay. Right, I think we can begin. Let me just move that. Okay. Thokozani Sanbonani, and welcome to another class, online class, Umsamo Education. My name is Sewanga African Kize, Chief Executive at Umsamo Institute. Thank you for those for coming back. I know last week we weren't here. We just decided to take a week's break, and I apologize for that. I should have made sure that the media team communicated that to everyone, but we just thought, let's just take a bit of a break just for 1 week, and then we're going to jump right back in. So today we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic, a very important topic, in that as we progress as a society and as the laws and regulations change in society, it allows for expression and different lifestyles. So before I begin, I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone, first of all, for joining us. I understand that the issue of sexuality and gender, and when you start talking about homosexuality and lesbianism, being a lesbian and members of the LGBTQ plus community, some people try to avoid that conversation completely, but you are here. We're all here to learn, and I ask that you keep an open mind, and you remember and reflect on the previous lectures that have taken place before this. And I strategically chose to do this lecture now in the hopes that the couple of hundred of you that are on here right now understand the fundamentals of African spirituality. You understand how Imimoya works. So this lecture shouldn't feel like I'm throwing you into hot water or throwing you into the deep end. But let us begin. I'm just going to, of course, I am going to begin how I always do, where we go through a bit of a recap. So we've gone through the fundamentals. We've covered surnames. We even looked at one of our first contemporary topics, if you want to call it that I looked at, was assisted conception. Do Abadala recognize surrogacy, in vitro, and so on? And then we went even further into surnames, looking far back as third and fourth generation. So it's grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents. And then, of course, a very, very important lecture, twins and the duality of Imimoya, understanding Imimoya Singuni, Nesindawa, and that's when we spoke about the triangle of Imimoya, and the importance of understanding Imimoya. It's fundamental, guys. If you haven't listened to that lecture and understood that lecture, you should really go back and watch it as many times as it takes for you to get it, because essentially everything comes from Imimoya, right? We looked at Ukuzalwa, also quite an important topic, especially for today. You need to understand certain principles from Ukuzalwa and how one can actually have Imimoya Emibili, how one can be two people in one, so how you can be a twin without actually being a twin. So in other words, me, I'm a twin, but I'm only one body. The fourth law of African spirituality. We then our final lecture before taking our break, we looked at African culture and God, and we spoke about the fifth law of African spirituality, looking at religion versus culture, and I introduced you all to the multi-layered triangle of spiritual connectivity. So today we're going to be taking it one step further, and I'm going to introduce you to the law 6 and 7 of African spirituality. Okay, and then, of course, as I always do, your family history. So every lesson, every lesson is linked to your family history. So after this lesson, there is a conversation about your family history that you're going to need to have. That's how I do all my lectures. So in the beginning of my lectures, end of my lectures, I always give you homework. Your homework is family history. That's how my lectures work, or talks rather. We're going to look at how sex is classified. What is sex? We're going to talk about gender, social constructions around gender, gender roles, and then looking at gender expression, because sometimes what you are classified as gender-wise isn't necessarily how you choose to express yourself, right? And of course, we're going to tuck into human sexuality, more particularly sexual orientation. So I've introduced you to 5 laws of African spirituality. The last one that we spoke about was that the foundation of culture is spirituality, and that through executing culture and practicing culture, one can reach full spiritual expression and manifestation of the ancestral gift. So in my last lecture, I spoke about how your job, right, must become a craft. And then a craft is something that serves purpose, and that purpose is designated by Abadala, right? And if your job never evolves into a craft, then you will never feel content with umsebenzi wakho or what you are currently doing. And you will always be limited in your potential as if you remain with your job. And the way you take your job from job to craft is spiritual wisdom. So once the spirit itongo releases their gift to you, then your job becomes a craft. And once it becomes a craft, itongo will reveal more and more gifts, but it can only do that once you have attained full spiritual expression. Very important law, especially for today. So today we are talking laws 6 and 7. And I mean, I think someone was asking me the other day, how many laws are there? And what I understand and what I see is we're looking at about 13 laws, around 13 laws, in no particular order. The first one, number 6, is the spiritual oppression or suppression of another spiritual being is detrimental to our own liberation. That means if I, in any way, shape, or form, inhibit or infringe upon someone else's spiritual expression, right, then I am doing that, I am harming myself. So in other words, if I want to reach full spiritual expression for myself, I must liberate others around me, and I must also be the kind of individual that allows other people's spirits around me to be liberated and expressed. Okay, so it's not enough for me. This is the one part where a lot of people miss out on, in that they do everything to the T. They do everything perfectly. But this, guys, 6 and 7 is going to be very, very difficult to get through. We might take a bit longer than an hour, but if you can get that, in order to liberate yourself, you need to liberate others. But on top of that, you also need to have an environment and a space and release energy that others feel liberated just by being in your presence, and they should feel comfortable being in your presence. Otherwise, you're never going to see full spiritual expression or liberation. Number 7 is very important, and I did struggle to articulate number 7. Social constructs of our plane do not come from the ancestral plane, nor do they apply to the ancestral plane. What I'm saying by that is that what we deem normal here in society, right? So anything that's a social contract is something that we have decided to attach to something in society. So we've decided to attach marriage and monogamy, right? And that's what we've decided. That's a social construct. We've decided to attach women and cooking. We've decided to attach men and the love of sports or cars, right? Those are social constructs, but they don't come. That's on our plane, but they don't come from Amatongo, nor do they apply to Amatongo. They have a different set of rules and a different set of things are different over there. So we do a big mistake of thinking, right? I also think it's partly from the spiritual superiority trap that I spoke about 2 weeks ago. Thinking that what we do here is superior to what Amatongo believe in. And what we do here must apply from that, must apply to Amatongo and comes from Amatongo. That's why I say to everybody, don't look at culture and see something that you are obligated to do, but rather look at culture as a means of spiritual expression, liberation, and understanding or comprehension. All right, because what you will begin to find is, that's why people don't understand why Abadala tell them to do certain things or show them certain things, because their social construct limits them from listening to Abadala, because they don't understand what Abadala work on a different level of understanding. They work on different rules. But let's tuck into the lecture, and hopefully it'll make more sense. Okay, so what is the kind of conversation you want to have with your family after this lecture? We want to look at this. Maybe a very uncomfortable conversation. Of all the homework assignments that I've given you, this possibly will be the most uncomfortable, because the idea of not conforming to the norm is really swept under the carpet in society. And I'm not only speaking from a Black family perspective, I'm speaking from a general society perspective. We sweep it under the carpet because it's just not the norm. So you want to look at the history of sexual expression in the family. Was there a grandfather or a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle that people weren't necessarily sure about? They never made it clear about where do they stand and what their intentions were, or who they were attracted to. But on top of that, you also need to look at, was this person discriminated against? And I'm going to explain to you, everyone, now why it's so important that you know if this particular person was discriminated against in London, Wasekai, because when that particular person comes back, right, Nina, as Lwamden, you are given a second opportunity to do right and allow Lentong to express themselves. But I'm going to explain further when I get into the lecture. Also, look at, was there any suicide, and what were the reasons that led to the mental illness? Was it an expression? Was this person abused? Those are the kind of conversations we really want to look at. We're looking at gender expression, sexual orientation, that kind of history, right? With each lecture, we need to be peeling back a layer of our family history. And this is, one of the layers of the family history that we need to pull back. Okay, I just want to see if there's any questions thus far. Okay, nothing that I see at the moment. Okay, guys, please keep the questions related to this particular topic. The other questions will get answered later on. If that's fine if they're not related to this particular topic, but there are people that will answer the questions that are not related to this topic. But for now, if you want me to answer the question here live, please keep it related to the topic. Okay, okay, I just want to put up one question. Can having the calling influence your sexuality, e.g., if your calling is mainly... Okay, so this question I'm actually going to answer in the lecture. I'm going to actually answer it in the lecture. So no questions for now. So I'm just going to... Oh, you're right. I do owe you a Q&A. I most definitely owe you a Q&A. Thank you. Please keep reminding me about that Q&A. I owe you a Q&A. Okay, right. Someone's asking Yinu Pasha. Briefly, Ukpasha, communicating Nabadal, and asking for clarity and guidance on anything and everything. 2 white candles and a bowl in the middle, please. I will get the team to drop again, not a problem, it's okay. We will drop the Zulu and English explanations for Ukpasha. Please, Tim, we'll re-release and post the recordings on Ukpasha. So let us begin. So I'm just gonna, because for some of us, the concept of, there's a lot of new concepts. I'm going to work through all the concepts. We're going to work through sex, we're going to work through gender, and then we're going to work through sexuality and sexual expression. And then we're going to conclude with how it can be understood from an African spiritual perspective. Because once you understand from an African spiritual perspective, you'll realize that the prejudice and oppression of members of the LGBTQ community is harmful to ourselves, it's harmful to our families, and it's harmful to society, and it does not make sense. Okay, let us push on. So sex is a binary, male, female, right? And how it is classified is using 3 things: genetics, gonads, and your phenotype. So genetics, you're essentially half mother, half father, 23 chromosomes from your mom, 23 chromosomes from your dad, comes together to make a full human being, which is 46 chromosomes, right? Don't worry if you don't understand the genetics and the biology. That's not important. I'm just trying to make you understand briefly. You don't have to understand it in depth. XY is going to be a male, XX is going to be a female. And Y chromosome is coming from the male side, it's coming from the male, right? So your father is responsible for determining whether or not you become a boy. And then XX, your father can give off, instead of giving a Y, your father can give his X. Okay. Then gonads is your reproductive organs on the insides, for women for insides, and then the phenotype is what's on the outside. Okay. So classification for males, you'd be 46, you'd be XY with testicles, and you'd have male genitals, i.e., you'd have male genitals, right? Then for females, it would be 46XF, and you would have ovaries with female genitalia. Okay. Now it does happen where a woman can be born with testicles on the inside, and it can happen where a lot of people it is possible for people to be born and not fit within this type of classification. That is possible. And there's a whole host of ways of classifying people scientifically. It is about, do they take, I think a couple of years ago, there was a ruler to measure the clitoris of the woman. If it's longer than a certain length, then it's no longer a clitoris, it's a penis. All of those degrading ways of sexual classification. But I'm happy to say that we've progressed past that, and we no longer have to subject our children to that. Whereas gender is different. So sex, biology, physiology, biochemistry, genetics, anatomy. Gender, on the other hand, gender is a social construct which society has attached roles and behaviors to. This is not a binary, but rather there is a range when it comes to gender, right? Gender roles are the societal norms and expectation. What is or is not acceptable for an individual of that particular gender. So, for instance, sex is a male, gender is man or men. So for me as a man, it would not be okay, for instance, for some people to do ballet, for example, or some people, a man is not supposed to have a child on their back. So that's something that women do. That is something that women do, right? So those are that's what you call gender roles in the family, that the woman is the one that and that the man does not do that. Okay. Gender identity, this is how one would refer to themselves, right? So I can say, even though my sex is male, I feel I do not identify with being a man, because remember, gender is a social construct. Female or other. So some people, when they identify themselves, they don't refer to themselves as male or female, but they'll refer to themselves as other, or no, sorry, not other, as a plural. So when you address them, you wouldn't say his or hers, you would say theirs, or they, or all of them. I hope that makes sense. So sometimes they want to be referred as in the plural, which is gender neutral, because they don't identify with either male or female. Don't worry, guys. I know it seems a little foreign, but I will explain to you how when you go with me more, it makes sense. I'll explain to you how and why it makes sense in a bit. Gender expression is how one chooses to present themselves, right? How one chooses to wear, what clothes to wear, how to look, how to dress, how to talk, how to walk, how to interact with people. That's all gender expression. But what can happen is that I can be sex, I can be a male, and sometimes how I choose to express my gender identity does not necessarily go with my gender, will not necessarily go with what is deemed a man should do. So I can decide to wear dresses one day and then a suit the next day. Or I can decide, same goes if I was a woman. If I was a woman, but I identify as a man and I choose to express, how I choose to express myself is to wear a lot of three-piece suits with a tie or a bow tie and so on and so forth. So that's gender expression. expression. I hope I'm not losing anyone. Let me just make sure that I'm not. I hope I'm not losing anyone. Okay. Right. So I don't see any questions. I'm certain we're not losing anyone. So we're just gonna push on. Okay. So examples of gender is, so cisgender is when the identity and expression align. So I'm a male, right? I'm a man. I identify with being a male, and how I express myself is also a male. I like to wear suits. I like to wear suits when it's in the summer. I'll wear vests. I don't wear any makeup. I'll always get like a nice fade, except now because it's lockdown. So how I express myself and how I identify are in alignment, right? That's cisgender. Transgender is when I'm born a man. I identify with being a man. I understand that I am a man. However, I do not wish to conform to the gender roles, and I do not wish to exhibit what men do or how a man should be. I choose to exhibit that of a woman, right? And I identify with being a woman, or I prefer the roles of a woman. That's transgender, right? Genderqueer doesn't necessarily conform to either societal distinction. Non-binary, not within the gender binary. Gender fluid is when someone moves between genders. So one, actually, before I go any further, I do need to acknowledge Uletu. Letu from Wits University, who did help me prepare this lecture. So thank you very much to him. If he is watching this, thank you to him. And basically, gender fluid means you move between genders. So today I can be dressed like this, how a male would typically dress. But tomorrow I can wear a skirt and a nice blouse and some heels, for example, right? And then the following day, I'm back to wearing a suit. So I can move between. I don't really have a select one. I move between them. Then gender, agender is there's no particular. I don't identify with either. No gender for that particular person. Sexuality, on the other hand, right? So we've done with gender. That's gender. Now we're moving on to sexuality. Sexuality. So we've done with sex. I told you about sex. I told you about gender. And now we want to speak about sexuality. Sexuality is the thoughts, fantasies, desires, and practices and roles of an individual. You can feel everything, but not everything is necessarily expressed or felt. So only you know your innermost desires, fantasies, and dreams. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go out and act upon that, or you're going to experience that, or you're going to look to try it out, right? And that's completely up to you. This is impacted by sociology, psychology, and the legal system. So basically, anything that's in society, how you're brought up, your religious beliefs, what the law says you can and cannot do, societal norms and expectations, all of that kind of have a role when it comes to your sexuality, and the influence that they have a great influence when it comes to your sexuality. Sexual orientation is a person's sexual and emotional attraction to somebody and the behavior that stems from that. So in other words, sexual orientation is to whom are you attracted to, and why, because that'll then determine your behavior depending on who you are attracted to, right? And there's a whole host of kinds of sexuality. Heterosexual, man likes woman likes man. That's straight. Homosexual, seen as liking the other gender. Bisexual, you like both genders. When I say gender, guys, I'm sorry, both sexes is what I should be saying. You like male and female. Pansexual, meaning you're not particularly picky whether the person's cisgender, transgender. You're attracted to people not necessarily they're not necessarily their gender, so you don't really mind if they're transgender. You don't really mind if so you asexual, you're not really attracted to anything at all. And then of course there's a range of sexualities: demisexual, polysexual, and gray sexual, right? So now we're going to get into where it's going to get a little complicated. When I speak about, I'm going to make sense of everything that I just told you. I'm going to make sense of it in the context of African spirituality. Okay. So the last time we spoke, I introduced you to the multi-layered triangle of connectivity. And to break it down simply, right? Because I remember I told you this is not 2D, this is 3D. God is the foundation. Then you get to amadlozi, namatongo. Then we get to our plane, which is body, mind, and spirit, the individual. So when I'm speaking about planes in law 6, social constructs only work in this plane over here, body, mind, and spirit, where we are, right? Where we are. Okay. When it comes to amadlozi, amatongo, they work. Social contracts don't flow down that way. They don't come from them. These are things that we've deemed necessary in society, right? So remember, your ancestors are made up of your mother's side and your father's side. So you have two sides in your triangle when it comes to ancestors: mother, father. Okay? Itongo, your ancestral spirit, okay, can either be female, male, or both. Because remember when we spoke about umuntu ozalwe embethe, okay, or umuntu oyiwele without knowing ukuthi bayiwele, right? If meaning nekhehla. And my twin, okay, twin in inverted commas, was isalukwazi, umuntu wesifazane. I am now born into this world. I am therefore, my spiritual identity, if you want to call it that, would be both male and female, because in the salwazi nekesh as well. Okay. Then autonomy, which is agency, is greatly influenced by the laws and structures and societal and social expectations. Right? So whether or not I decide to wear skinny jeans instead of a bootleg jean, whether or not I decide to wear tailor-fitted suit as opposed to a big suit, all of those, that decision making is influenced by society. That decision to do that is controlled by what society deems acceptable. The body is biology and sexual and sexual classification, genetics, and psychology. So what we need to understand is that physically you have a gender, physically you have a sex, right? So you have a sex physically, okay? But that sex doesn't necessarily go all the time with the sex of your spirit, itong. Because you can be umuntu wesilisa kodwa ungenwa ugogo isalukwazi. The same way you can be umuntu wesifazane ongenwa ikhehla. But in the same breath, mawuzalwe wembethe noma uyiwele that you don't know about, you can be both male and female. Okay, you can be isalukwazi nogogo at the same time. Okay, so now when we speak about full spiritual expression, we need to consider, okay, itongo and what itongo desires. We need to understand that gender expression and gender identity are influenced by itongo namatongo, are influenced by itongo. Okay? Because if mina, I'm a male, right? And noma I am a product, noma I have both male and nekesh and esalgwaz, right? Equal parts want to be expressed in my life, right? So I can't choose, okay, fine, because I can't say, okay, fine, because I am a male and I identify as a male, society says I should do this. This is how I should express myself. No, right? Just because remember what I said about abadala they don't recognize social constructs. So if mina nginekhehla and isalukwazi, there are some days when I'm going to feel like expressing lelo salukwazi. And some days I'll feel like expressing that male. Do you see? But on top of that, you still have your autonomy and your agency, right? So just because I'm choosing to express isalukwazi one day and I'm choosing to express lelo khehla one day, in other words, male, and I'm expressing female, male and female, I can still be attracted to women even though I am a man, right? But I can still sometimes, you know what, I want to wear makeup, I want to wear heels, and I want to wear a skirt today. But I'm still attracted to men. You know, I'm not gay. So we must never don't confuse what someone shows you. What someone shows you, right? Don't assume their sexual orientation just based on what someone shows you. Let them be the ones to tell you or guide you or decide, right? Don't assume that just because umuntu wesilisa ugqoka irogo nama high heels nama crocs ukuthi uthanda abantu besilisa and he's gay. No, because that very same man uzohlangana naye estradini egqoka ama heels and whatnot, kanti kusasa uzohlangana naye boardroom egqoka isuit. You see? So the difficulty comes, so you need to understand, let me say, the gender, or if you want to say the sex of itongo lakho, because that influences what you identify as. And we need to understand that itongo namatongo, Tina, in our minds here as a society, if I am a man, this is what a man is supposed to look like, this is what a man is supposed to do, therefore I am going to have itongo. No, it does not go like that with abadala. Abadala can say, yazin, lo muntu lo uzongenwa ugogo, lo muntu wesifazana lo uzongenwa ikhehla. Why? Let me explain why. Because as a society, we are obsessed with the packaging of the ancestral gift, but we do not focus on the gift itself. So we constantly say, Emlambo Munye, stop seeing abantu, but stop seeing or looking for umuntu. Bega itongo, bona itongo, ngoba umuntu inyama. Inyama can change at any given point in time in life. It can change, right? And even if leo nyama changes, respect that person and appreciate that person, because as lo muntu is changing and evolving, they are getting closer to spiritual expression. And as they get closer to spiritual expression, they get close to what? Their ancestral gift. And when you don't know what this ancestral gift, what the implications of that ancestral gift are for us as a society. So, for example, we won't care right now if the person to come with the cure for COVID-19 was a gay man or a gay woman, or a trans man or a trans woman. Would you care? You wouldn't care. You would just be happy. You would celebrate the gift. You would celebrate the gift of the cure for COVID-19. You won't care. The expression of itongo is secondary to the gift. However, right, the problem with us as a society is that the expression, we want the gift to come before the expression so that we can value this person, so that we can treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve, when that is not the case. If you want blessings, bring more blessings. And the first thing you should do if you want the blessing of that ancestral gift of the person in your family who may or may not have the cure to COVID-19 is you must appreciate who they are right now before the ancestral gift comes, right? Their value is not in their ancestral gift, okay? So their value is in the fact that uthi bayitongo, and the fact that they are itongo, you are not here as any member of society to impose your beliefs or social constructions, or even to decide for someone how they should or should not express themselves. And even if that particular individual decides to go as far as changing their gender completely, you need to respect that. When that person says to you, Wuti, please don't address me as him or her, but rather address me as they or all, by you respecting how they want to be addressed, you are not addressing them, you are addressing itongo lab. And remember what I said in the beginning, that by liberating them, you are liberating yourself. And by oppressing them, you are oppressing yourself. Okay? Because Abadala cannot give blessings to someone or something that is a killer of other people's blessings, if that makes sense. So in other words, if you're a killer or a destroyer of other people's sexual expression and spiritual expressions and spiritual gifts, then why then would Abadala give it to you? Because clearly you are a killer of ancestral expression and ancestral gifts. So that is why you need to be careful of how you treat people who do not conform to social norms or your expectations of how they should be. But rather you should be fluid enough to understand and respect, but also to not see inyama, not see umzimba womuntu, but see itongo. Okay, because this person that is coming with, we don't know how they are going to, what gift they are coming with. All right, that is why, and I'm actually going to take the time to just talk about these different kinds of sexual orientation. There are two influencing factors. So I've spoken about factor number one, the identity of whether or not unekehle, isalwazi, or both. Sometimes what can happen, option number two, if you are born in Nekehle, this is if you're a reincarnation in particular. Lelkehle lived 200-300 years ago, or 400 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever the case may be. But ngaleso skhathi could not express themselves. They could not fully be who they were because of the law, because of society, because of their family, because of religious beliefs, because of cultural beliefs as well, because of the notion that homosexuality or transgender or anything from the LGBTQ plus community is un-African. That person goes to their grave, Lelo Tongo goes to the grave, never having even touched or scratched the surface of expression and liberation. Therefore, when they come back, they will come back in the same family. But now, the laws have changed. Society has changed, right? But now is the family going to change? So now the family has been given a second opportunity to do right by Leli Tongo, that came 200-300 years ago but could never express themselves, right? And if Nina as a family choose to oppress and suppress Leli Tongo, expressing themselves through their sexuality and their gender expression, what you are doing is you are suppressing everyone in the family, right? And when one family is suppressed, that is one family, right, which cannot make a full contribution to society. I hope that makes sense. So what's important to note and understand that apart from psychologically damaging your child, by telling them that they can't be gay, by telling them that they have to conform to these social norms, what you are doing, you are spiritually damaging them. On top of psychologically damaging them, and sometimes physically damaging them, you are spiritually damaging that particular child. And Nani, as a family, right, by spiritually damaging one child, because I remember I said in my fourth lecture, the blessing of children, okay, you spiritually are damaging everyone else in the family. So if you have 4 children, the one does not conform to societal norms, right? Maybe they're transgender, maybe they're transgender or they're queer gender, right? And you're thinking to yourself, I'll sing discipline and keep dabane, whatever you want to say. Apologies for that word. But I'm gonna explain that word. I'm gonna explain that word. I was using it. So I was in keep a lento, right? When you oppress this child, you are actually suppressing all four of your children, because lezi ngane ezintathu eziwu-3 ezikhona ezinye, right? They share the same mother and father. They come from the same household. Therefore, you're either liberating all or you're suppressing all. So sometimes people say that they're struggling with their child and what their child is going through. That is because they are suppressing their children. The reason parents or sometimes society suppresses abantu that are expressing themselves differently through their sexual orientation or their sexual expression, right, is because they don't understand law 7. Law 7 states social constructs and norms are on this plane over here, what we deal with as people. We mustn't apply that to what Amatongo and Abadala do, because Abadala do not do what we do. They work on a completely different set of rules. If they feel that Lil Salwazi is going to be better off in that male child, they go, that male child. If they feel that, you know what, Lil Kesha is going to be better off in that woman, because they know lo muntu wesifazane needs to have lokbodla kwekesha, right? Because she's going to be in a certain position to do certain things, right? So there are two things you need to understand. One, am I inheriting ikesha noma isalwazi that was previously a member of the LGBTQ plus community and was suppressed? Or two, does my spiritual agenda and my physical and psychological agenda not necessarily go along, right? Because sometimes, and that is how some people are bisexual, because they can be both. I can have isalwazi nekesha, right? And I like women. I'm a man. I like women. That's what society expects. But now and again, as I'm going through, as ngenza izinto ngikhula, you know, ngenza isinto and everything, lelo salwazi also begins to express themselves, and then I'm attracted to men as well. So sometimes that can happen, right? But now the reason where there's no confusion, don't get it twisted. Those people are not confused. They are not confused at all. And if you do have a child that you think is on both, that is bisexual, leave him. What I would say to you as a parent and as anybody else, to make sure ukuthi yonke into ngokwesintu, yonke into ngokwemimoya kuhlanzekile and kuqondile, so that akukhululeke ingane to express themselves and find themselves spiritually, right? And they can find someone who will also understand how they are. Let me explain. So when it comes to relationships are also, there's a spiritual element when it comes to relationships, right? So if meaning salwas nekesh, right? I obviously can't. It wouldn't make sense for me to pair up with someone on salwas pair, right? It wouldn't make sense. But what would make sense is if lo muntu that I'm paired with or I fall in love with also unesalwazi nekesha, so that ikesha lam nesalwazi sakhe bayaxhumana, isalwazi sam nekesha lak bayaxhumana, sizwana. So do you see how it's so important to know your to understand your spiritual identity, and to understand and allow for spiritual expression to take place through spirit? Look, sexual orientation is a form of spiritual expression. That's what we need to understand. Gender expression is a form of spiritual expression as well. I just want to take a few questions before I carry on going. Okay. Right, here's a question. Does changing one's gender have an impact on a relationship with your ancestors? Do you need to ask them first for you to decide to do so? Ngiyabonga Zolibani. Ngiyabonga kakhulu Zolibani. So, first of all, guys, before you go to any kind of surgery, you do need to go uyocela kubadala kuqala, because they need to go. I always say ithongo kumele ukuthi lihambe phambili, so they can select the right doctor for you, select the right nurses, select the right hospitals, select the right anesthetist, and so on and so forth. Ithongo kumele lihamba phambili. So whether or not it's a gender change, any kind of hospital intervention, if it's surgery, humble pie. Does it impact the relationship with abadala? No. What needs to happen here, right, is, only thing I would say is if someone feels that kind of strong inclination, I would suspect that lo muntu uzalwa embed. And my only concern, guys, and this should be the concern of everyone here, is imimoya, is it fine? Ihlanzekile? And that's it. Ngoba, mina, I don't care. We don't care about the packaging. What we should be concerned about is itong. Because if itong is satisfied with the vessel changing from male to female, who are we to get in the way? And if lo muntu feels so strongly about changing their gender, kusho ukuthi seliyakhuluma nalo itong was like, you know what, actually, I want to change my gender. And in actual fact, changing one's gender is also a form of gender expression. And because it's a form of gender expression, it's a form of spiritual expression. Tologuti, once this person has changed, right, Itongo now reveals a different element, or a different element of their gift, or a different ancestral gift, right? So now my question is, how many Black children, right, have untapped spiritual and ancestral gifts waiting to come out, but they cannot come out because their spiritual expression is limited by the fact that they cannot express themselves in their sexual orientation or through their gender. So then, with that understanding, please tell me then how it is simply enough to change the laws and policies in South Africa in order for us to reach economic transformation. What we don't understand is that economic transformation, I understand this is a bit of a digression, a bit of a sidebar, economic transformation and liberation of Black people requires spiritual liberation. That's first and foremost. And until we get to that point, we can change all the laws, all the policies, which I understand systematically need to be addressed, but until you address it spiritually as well, we're always going to be limited. Moving on to the next question. Okay, how do you balance this realms in this challenging times as Iwele? So being Iwele, especially, look, if you're Iwele and the other one passed away, you've done everything that needs to be done, you're really okay. The people that are in a tricky situation, abantu Iwele, and they are two. Because if you were fraternal twin, where different gender and when always I was, now you have two. You need to first cleanse the passing of one twin, right? And you need to also, because essentially uzala wembete. So you need to welcome Lelo Tong or Wembete, right? I've spoken about that in the previous episode when I spoke about Uzala Wembete. That is the first and foremost, the best way to start. Start by welcoming them. Once they have been welcomed, you can begin to understand what they desire, right? Once you know what they desire, and you have a constant communication, and there's a back and forth between the two of you, then you can begin to live. The thing is, we think about abadala are not people too. They are also people. So sometimes you can be told, no, you can't eat this. Go back to them after a couple of months and say, yes, sure. Can you please just allow me to have bacon once more? And then they can say no, or they can say yes. So it really is a relationship where you need to go back and forth and constantly communicate. I just want to answer a few more questions. Okay, here's another one. So true. Medically, if a child is born with ambiguous genitalia, we encourage the parents to give them gender-neutral names. Dogos, everything a child should be gender neutral, including the clothes they wear. When they reach puberty and they have reached their full gender expression, they get counseled and interviewed and surgery is even offered to them to make them a male or a female. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for those comments, Zetu. I want to also tuck into the names. Why I can understand that the notion of oppression or persecution of the LGBTQ plus community doesn't make sense is that why then are so many names, especially in isiZulu, in Nguni languages limited, why are so many names unisex? Why are so many names can apply to both men and women? If gender fluidity was not necessarily meant to be our thing, why then do we have these names which in themselves are gender fluid, which can be used for both men and women? Kiza had a question. Okay, I'll go back to the question. I see it here. I'll go back to the question. Right? How I feel about if a child is born ambiguous is tricky. And before we go, I must admit that I'm conflicted when it comes to a child that's born ambiguous, in the sense that medically sometimes it does make things more easier in tracking the child if you understand the gender and you know the gender. But spiritually, I also understand that, as in, I don't think we understand someone who was born with ambiguous genitalia. That person is incredibly gifted, right? Which is what I really do believe, that those of the LGBTQ plus community are incredibly gifted. And I don't know how to do it, but I would love to do a study. And I really do feel like there was a huge contingent, a huge proportion of the LGBTQ plus community, but they don't know it. And they are incredibly gifted, because to survive what they've survived, to go through what they've gone through, and do you understand the level? Do you know how incredible you have to be as a person to be able to identify as a man today, dress like a man, and the following day you can dress like a woman and kill it and still do well? I think that's phenomenal. So I really do feel that is one study I'd love to do. I really do feel like abantu abazali bembethe baningi in the LGBTQ plus community. So Zetu, I'm not sure what you're asking, but I assume you're asking what would one do in the event that their child is born with ambiguous genitalia? Whew, tough question, but I would say I would want to hold off on the medical intervention. The reason I'm saying I would want to hold off on the medical intervention or the surgical intervention is because I need to understand spiritually first what's going on. I need to, myself and my wife need to comprehend what is going on spiritually in Lengane. What do Abadala want us to do with Lengane? Because I do not want to do something in Lengane only for what is shy later on, because Abadala said, when Lengane, this is not your child. Remember what I said in the previous episodes? This is not your child. You are a custodian of Lengane and this blessing from God, Nabadala. That's what I would do if my child was born with ambiguous genitalia. Once abadala have demonstrated, but I think I would hold off on surgical intervention until I've wrapped my head around it medically. But I'm trying to find. Okay, here we go. If a boy child was introduced to Etongweni by doing imbeleko, surely you would want to say thank you to the ancestors for the boy. You would slaughter a male goat. Now say, for instance, the boy is gay and needs to do a particular ritual, which will be done. Now say the boy is gay and needs a particular ritual to be done, and you will now slaughter a female goat. Secondly, when Lilobolo happens, two males, what would they say to Edgozen? Okay, thank you very much for the questions, First of all, imbeleko is for both men and women. Umhlonyani, right? Or sweet 16, I guess we can call it that. When a woman has her first menstruation, or a boy has his first nocturnal ejaculation, i.e. wet dream, can both men and women can have umsebenzi done for them. Umemulo noma ukukhulisa ingane, both men and women can have umsebenzi done for them, because imsebenzi is not about inyama negazi, it is about ithongo. So if you have introduced ingane to ethongweni ngembeleko, then the boy comes out and says, no, baba, ma, I am gay, right? There is no reason why you can still continue to do imbuzi for them, right? In terms of determining the gender of the goat that you must use, or alternatively, you can even ask the boy himself, because if umfana feels strongly that, can you please slaughter me a female goat though I am a male, then kusho ukuthi nalo ithongo liyakhuluma ukuthi how ngihlabele imbuzi wesifazane, you know, and then you can confirm ngophahla uye ethongweni. So people think, and thank you very much for bringing this up, because people think, no, my child can't change his gender because I have introduced them as umfana kubadala, and then how am I going to do memulo now for my son on 21? No, who did you introduce to abadala? You didn't introduce uSiyabonga Mkhize. You introduced ithongo lam to abadala. Ngoba ithongo lam comes from abadala, leaves abadala, and then I am born and enters into me. Therefore, I need to be reintroduced to abadala. Hence, we do imbeleko. So, what to say to people who would say you can't do you're not allowing your child to change their gender at 21 because you introduced them to abadala as a boy when they were 1 year old is nonsense, right? You're not understanding the spiritual implication or foundations of African culture. You didn't introduce me, this male figure. You introduced itongo lam. You did umsebenzi for itongo, right? So itongo is still the same at 1 year old, 3 years old, 5 years old, at 21. Okay. Then your next question: when lobola happens between two males, what would you say to Edlozin, right? So we are actually working on, one of the things we're going to work on is, Dr. Mkhize has worked very hard to document. And I think a lot of people have documented on culture based on heterosexual norms, right? And no one's actually written a book. No one's actually written African culture and the execution of African culture from a 21st century perspective. And heterosexual is not the norm anymore, as we can understand and as we can see, right? And I think for me to answer this question, I would need to first explain the lobola process, and then I would want to explain it how it would happen were it were two men and it would be two women. Sorry, 2 men and 2 women. I think that's the best thing to do. But briefly, what I would say is they would decide between one of them, right? Depending on what ubani or onesalwas and ubani onekeh, you can then decide how you're going to navigate the lobola process, right? And what you'll find is, because we're actually busy writing this at the moment, is that it's pretty much going to be the same. It's just that instead of it being a man and a woman, it's going to be a man and a man. Here's Let's Scholar saying, I think there is a simple solution. If a child does not fit the norm, you can easily present them as umntwana. Thank you very much, Letu. This is exactly the best. I think this is the best solution to do it. And you can do imbeleko for ingane. You present it because kahle mas phahla for umsebenzi senze imbeleko. When we were doing it for my niece and my nephew, these are the exact words that we used. We didn't say nansi ingane yomfana, nansi insizwa, nansi ingane yentombazana. We didn't say that. We just said nansi ingane yenu, nangu umntwana wenu, siyabonga. That's all we said. So if the child does not fit in the beginning, I agree with Let's call do it this way. Okay. Just want to tuck into a few more questions. Okay, I've answered that. Okay, I've answered that. Oh, sorry, just lost live feed. Okay, so I think that is pretty much the end of my talk rather, and I think I wanted to end my final words for this talk were: you need to look at your family tree, look at your family history. Was there anyone that was previously discriminated against? Was there anyone that was oppressed for any reason at all? Because chances are that particular individual could not thrive at that time, and they will make a return. And when they do return, right, you need to be able to recognize that. Even if it's not anyone in the family right now, you may have a child, your sister or your brother may have a child, and that particular individual may come out in your niece or your nephew, and you should be able to identify that. Nimtshele ukuthi, hi, no man, yazi ugogo wasitshela ngosibanibani, who we weren't really sure about his sexual orientation or kwangathi bethandana nabantu besilisa noma bethandana nabantu besifazane u-auntie, and then bamshaya and benza so. See, those kind of things you need to understand. You need to know that. I know it's an uncomfortable part of the family tree and the family history, but like I said in the beginning, that until we as a society stop oppressing and persecuting members of the LGBTQ community, we will always limit our own expression. So hurting them hurts ourselves, right? Loving them and appreciating them and respecting them loves ourselves, respects ourselves, and helps us reach spiritual expression as well. So if you are, and we can't be upset about, like I said in the beginning, we can't be upset about the packaging. You can't be upset about the packaging of the ancestral gift. You know, the problem is, as a society, you want to see the gift before the person is expressed, when you need to understand that social constructs, now abadala don't know what social constructs are. Tina nje siphila kanje because we this is what we feel is fit. But abadala don't know what social contracts are. Abadala don't think ukuthi just because abadala don't see anything wrong with ngokufaka isalukwazi in a male body. Abadala see nothing wrong with putting ikhehle in a female's body. They see nothing wrong with that. Sometimes abadala, they don't mind ukufaka isalukwazi nekhehle in one body. They see nothing wrong with that. Because our social norms are ours, they are not theirs. Bona, they live on they work on a different system, on a different plane. Tina umsebenzi wethu is to say itongo lidingani to be expressed. And as a parent, my job, I would say, Yasin, what does my child need me to do ukuthi he reaches his full potential spiritually, mentally, and physically? And if you are limiting your child's potential, you are limiting your own potential. And you are squandering the blessing that is children that has been bestowed upon you. And yikonje, some families, right? And I've mentioned it before. Yikonje, some families, no one is marrying into them because you have a history of spiritually oppressing people. But that is a conversation for another day when I speak about marriage and relationships and everything else. But you need to look at your family and say to themselves, especially families with 3 or 4 boys, and you're like, oh my gosh, why is no one getting married? Blah, blah, blah. You need to ask yourself, are we a family of spiritual liberation or spiritual oppression? So that's it for today, guys. Thank you very much for taking the time to tuck in. I'm just going to spend the last, we're a little over time. We'll spend 5 more minutes quickly just explaining so I'm explaining, answering some questions. Here, was asking, ask a valid question. Isn't one of the reasons for umshado ukwandisa umndeni? How does that work? Ukwandisa umndeni is not the primary function of umshado. The primary function of umshado is relationship building. I spoke about this, I think it was in the 3rd when I spoke about Imimoya. Abadala like spiritual diversity as well as genetic diversity. And they also want relationships with people. So relationship building and spiritual diversity is the first and foremost, the primary reason behind umshado. Because in the getting children is much easier, is easier than building relationships. You can adopt, you can do IVF, as I spoke about in my assisted conception lecture. Getting children is not as difficult as it is to build relationships. The primary function of marriage is bringing people together. So we need to get it out of our heads that, if I marry a woman, she must come here. I want something. Azalingane. No, that's not the point. Remember, we fell in love before we fell in love. Amatongo fell in love, right? And that's what's important, that we bring these two people together to bring these families together. Okay. There's one more. Okay, this is the last question. In other words, what they call reincarnation, rebirth, transmigration does exist. It does exist. It does exist. It does exist. And what is tricky, the only thing that's tricky with us is that it's possible for you to be a reincarnation of two people, but you're one individual. So the thing is, when it comes to manifestation of spiritual things, because these conversations are normalized kind of post 94, we're still researching and investigating and getting a better understanding of how these manifestations come about. Someone's asking if there are recordings of the lectures. Yes, they are all available on YouTube from lecture 1 all the way up until now. This is number 8. Okay, I'm just going to answer this last question, then I'll go. Hey, see, I just want to know, want to say, one has done abortion. She wants to do a ritual and apologize to the ancestors. How can she do it without extended family knowing if they don't have parents anymore? So this would be Mbozi, Tatekazi, Mswani, Unyongo, Hlanganisi, ugeze bese yemfuleni, geze emfuleni. Faka isiphandle, if isiphandle is part of usiko lwakho, qhubeka nempilo. That's how you do it. That's how you cleanse. P.S. Cleansing is for both man and woman, because the child has a father and a mother. I don't understand where this notion, this belief comes from, that because umuntu wesifazana has the child, it's okay if indoda ingagezi but mina ngiyageza, but umuntu wesifazana kumele ukuthi ageze. No, umuntu wesilisa needs to cleanse themselves, because they're going to break up with that woman. They're going to go and marry or date someone else, and they're going to carry lesisinyama from that child that they lost or was aborted into the next relationships. And this is what I always tell women, that you need to ask serious questions of the man that you are with, right? Assuming it's a heterosexual relationship, that if the man is going to say no, she aborted it, but angezanga lutho ngoba isibeletho besinaye asihlale kumina. It's nonsense. Child has 2 parents. Both people must be cleansed. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I know we ran a little over time, about 8 minutes over time. I hope you guys have a lovely Sunday afternoon. Please stay safe and look after yourself, and let's socially distance as much as possible. Sangomas versus medium, I'll definitely do that. So what you're asking for is kind of a types of healers kind of conversation. I'll definitely have a types of healers conversations in the weeks coming up. Thank you very much, and have a lovely evening.